The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle. Let me tell you about a man who woke up one morning and didn't recognize his own apartment. Not because he'd moved, not because anything had changed physically, but because he had died the night before, or at least the person he thought he was had died. His name was Eckhart Tolle, and just hours earlier, he'd been sitting alone in the dark, paralyzed by a depression so crushing that a single thought kept circling his mind like a vulture. I cannot live with myself any longer. Over and over, I cannot live with myself. And then, in a flash of awareness that would change millions of lives, another thought emerged. Wait, if I can't live with myself, then there must be two of me. The I and the self. So which one am I? That question shattered something fundamental in his consciousness. And in the space that opened up, he experienced a peace so profound, so complete, that when he opened his eyes the next morning, the world looked like he was seeing it for the first time. He spent the next 2 years sitting on park benches in a state of bliss, trying to understand what had happened. People would sometimes sit next to him just to feel whatever was radiating from him. He owned almost nothing. He did almost nothing. He just was. Eventually, he began to teach, and what he taught became The Power of Now, a book that sold over 10 million copies in more than 50 languages. Oprah calls it one of the most transformative books she's ever read. It sits on the nightstands of CEOs and students, therapists and athletes, seekers and skeptics. But here's what makes it dangerous, in the best possible way. This isn't a book about improving your life. It's not about becoming more successful, more disciplined, more anything. It's about recognizing that almost everything you've been taught about happiness is backwards. That the person you think you are doesn't actually exist. That the voice in your head narrating your life isn't you. And that the source of almost all your suffering isn't your circumstances. It's your relationship with time itself. Sound radical? It gets more radical. Tolle is telling you that the past and future are illusions, that they exist only as thoughts happening now, that you've been spending your entire life running from an enemy that doesn't exist, chasing a happiness that can only be found in the one place you've been trained to ignore. This moment, right here, right now. And once you truly understand this, not intellectually but in your bones, everything changes. So here's my promise to you. In the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to explore ideas that might make you uncomfortable. They might challenge beliefs you've held your entire life. But if you stick with me, if you let these ideas really land, you might just discover that the peace and fulfillment you've been searching for isn't somewhere out there in your future. It's been here all along, hiding in plain sight. Ready? Let's step into the now. The story of how Eckhart Tolle became Eckhart Tolle begins with a man who had no reason to be on a spiritual path. He wasn't raised in an ashram. He didn't study with Tibetan monks. He was born in Germany, grew up in a home fractured by conflict, and by his 20s found himself in London pursuing graduate studies and quietly falling apart. Depression had been his companion since adolescence, but by age 29 it had become unbearable. He describes waking up night after night at 2 or 3 in the morning, gripped by a feeling of such intense dread that he could barely breathe. Everything felt heavy. Pointless, like dragging himself through existence under an invisible weight. And then came that night, that thought, I cannot live with myself any longer. It wasn't the first time he'd had that thought, but this time, something different happened. As the thought repeated, another awareness emerged, asking, who is the I that cannot live with the self? Are they not both the same? The question hung in the darkness of his mind, and suddenly, like a key turning in a lock, his entire sense of self dissolved. The thinking stopped, not because he tried to stop it, but because the structure that generated compulsive thought had collapsed. What he experienced next he describes as being drawn into what felt like a vortex of energy, not frightening, not dramatic, just a deep stillness. A silence so vast that when he emerged from it hours later, he barely recognized his own reflection. For months afterward, he walked through London in a state of wonder. Colors seemed more vivid. Ordinary objects, a flower, a stone, a drop of water, appeared miraculous. He had no desire to do anything, achieve anything, become anything. The depression wasn't managed or suppressed. It was simply gone, replaced by what he calls a deep peace that has never left me since. Now you might be thinking, great story, but what does that have to do with me? I'm not suicidally depressed. I have responsibilities. I can't just sit on park benches for 2 years. Fair enough. But here's what Tolle discovered during those years of silence, and what he wants you to understand. The mechanism that created his suffering is the same mechanism creating yours. It's just that in his case, it became so extreme, so unbearable, that it finally broke. That mechanism? It's identification with the mind. Let me explain what that means, because this is the foundation of everything. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there's a voice in your head. Maybe it's commenting on what I'm saying. Maybe it's thinking about something you need to do later. Maybe it's judging whether this is useful or not. That voice is so familiar, so constant, that you probably assume it's you. It's the narrator of your life story, right? But here's the thing, if you can observe the voice, if you can hear it thinking, then who's doing the observing? Stay with me here, because this is crucial. There's the thinker, the voice narrating, commenting, worrying, planning, and then there's the awareness that notices the thinking. The consciousness that watches thoughts arise and fall, like clouds passing through the sky. Most people are so completely identified with the voice, with the thinking mind, that they don't even know there's a difference. They think they are their thoughts, and that's the root of suffering. Why? Because the thinking mind, what Tolle calls the ego, lives in time. It's constantly referencing the past, your memories, your identity, your story of who you are. And it's constantly projecting into the future, your goals, your fears, your hopes, your anxieties. Think about worry for a second. What is worry? It's your mind creating scenarios about future events, events that haven't happened and might never happen, and then generating real emotion in response to these mental fictions. You're literally suffering over something that exists only in your head. Or think about resentment. That lives entirely in the past. You're replaying events that are over, that can't be changed, and creating fresh suffering in this present moment based on something that no longer exists except as a memory. This is what Tolle means by, quote, quote, psychological time. It's different from clock time, which is practical and necessary. If you have a meeting at 3, you need to know that. If you're learning from past experience, that's useful. But psychological time is different. It's when you're lost in mental narratives about the past and future, when you're suffering over things that aren't actually happening right now. And here's the kicker. The ego needs psychological time to survive. Your sense of self, your identity, is built from your past and projected into your future. I'm a good student because I got high grades. I'm shy because of that embarrassing thing that happened. I'll be happy when I achieve this goal. I'll be complete when I find the right relationship. The ego is constantly telling you that you're not enough as you are, that you need something more. That fulfillment is just around the corner, in the next achievement, the next experience, the next milestone. And so you spend your entire life chasing a future moment when you'll finally be complete, finally be happy, completely missing the fact that the only moment you ever have is this one. Tolle tells a story that illustrates this perfectly. He once met a woman who told him she'd been planning a trip to India her entire adult life. She'd saved for years. She'd read countless books. She'd dreamed about it constantly. And finally, after decades of planning, she went. And you know what she told him? She said she spent the entire trip thinking about all the places she still wanted to visit next. Even when she'd reached her dream destination, her mind was somewhere else. She was never actually there. That's most people's lives, always living for some future moment, completely missing the fact that life is happening now, this breath, this heartbeat, this moment. But let's get practical, because you might be thinking, sure, but I have goals, I have ambitions. Are you saying I should just give up on everything and sit around being present? Not at all. And this is where people often misunderstand Tolle's teaching. He's not against planning or goals or working toward things. What he's pointing to is the difference between using time and being used by time, between thinking when you need to think and being enslaved by compulsive thinking. Here's a question. When was the last time you actually decided to think? Most of the time, thinking just happens. The voice in your head is running on autopilot, generating an endless stream of commentary, judgment, worry, and fantasy. You're not using your mind as a tool. Your mind is using you. And that's exhausting. It's literally draining your life energy to maintain this constant mental noise. Think about how tired you feel at the end of a day when all you've done is sit and think. You haven't done anything physical, but you're exhausted because the mind has been running non-stop. What Tolle discovered, and what every genuine spiritual teaching points to, is that there's another way to live. There's a place of stillness, of awareness, that exists underneath thought. And when you access that place, when you become present, something remarkable happens. Life starts working better. Not because you're trying harder or thinking more or planning better, but because you're acting from clarity instead of mental noise. You're responding to what is instead of reacting from accumulated psychological baggage. Let me give you a real example from everyday life. You're having a conversation with someone, and they say something that triggers you. Maybe it's critical, maybe it's dismissive, maybe it just hits a sore spot. If you're identified with your mind, here's what happens. Instant reaction. Your ego feels attacked. Your mind generates a defensive response. You might snap back, or shut down, or spend the next hour replaying the conversation and imagining better comebacks. But if you're present, if there's awareness, something different happens. You notice the impulse to react. You feel the emotion in your body, but there's a space between the stimulus and your response. And in that space, you have a choice. Maybe you respond calmly. Maybe you ask a clarifying question. Maybe you simply acknowledge what was said without taking it personally. Same situation, completely different outcome. And the difference is presence. This is what Tolle means when he talks about surrender and acceptance. These words make people nervous because they sound passive, like you're giving up. But that's not what he means at all. Acceptance means acknowledging reality as it is in this moment, not liking it necessarily, not preferring it, just recognizing this is what is. And from that recognition, from that acceptance, you can respond effectively. Resistance, on the other hand, is arguing with reality. It's when your mind says, this shouldn't be happening, or this isn't fair, or why me? And all of that resistance creates suffering on top of whatever the actual situation is. Think about being stuck in traffic. The situation is, you're in your car, cars aren't moving. That's it. But your mind adds layers. This is terrible. I'm going to be late. This always happens to me. Why is there always traffic when I'm in a hurry? And now you're not just stuck in traffic. You're suffering. You're tense. You're frustrated. And you know what? You're still stuck in traffic. The resistance didn't help anything. It just made you miserable. But what if you accepted it? Not loved it, not wanted it, but simply acknowledged, this is the situation. I'm in traffic. That's what's happening right now. Suddenly, something shifts. You're still in traffic, but you're not suffering. You might put on music you enjoy. You might use the time to think about something pleasant. Or you might just be present with whatever is. The situation hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. And that changes everything. Now let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable, the pain body. This is one of Tolle's most powerful and disturbing insights. He describes the pain body as accumulated emotional pain from your past that lives on in your energy field. It's all the hurt, trauma, anger, shame, and fear that you never fully processed, never fully felt, never fully released. And here's the really unsettling part. The pain body is almost like a parasitic entity. It wants to survive, and it survives by feeding on negative emotion. Have you ever noticed how sometimes you can't let go of anger? How you keep replaying arguments in your mind, generating more and more outrage, even though you know it's not helping? That's the pain body feeding. It's creating situations in your mind that generate the emotional pain it needs to survive. Or maybe you've noticed how some people seem addicted to drama, how they always have a crisis, always have something to complain about, always find something wrong. That's a heavy pain body at work. It's taken over their personality so completely that they don't even recognize it anymore. And it's not just personal. Tolle talks about collective pain bodies, shared by families, ethnic groups, nations. These collective pain bodies are why old wounds never heal, why grievances get passed down through generations, why conflicts that started decades or centuries ago still trigger violence today. Think about any long-standing feud between countries, between families, between groups. At some level, nobody even remembers exactly how it started, but the pain body remembers, and it keeps feeding on the resentment, the sense of victimhood, the need for revenge. So what do you do about this? How do you deal with the pain body? The answer is both simple and challenging. You bring awareness to it. You observe it without identifying with it. You feel the emotion in your body, without believing the stories your mind creates to justify it. Next time you feel a strong negative emotion arising, anger, jealousy, fear, shame, try this. Don't suppress it, don't act on it, and don't believe the mental narrative around it. Just feel it. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice how it wants to take over your thinking. And in that noticing, in that awareness, it begins to lose its power. This is one of the most practical applications of presence. The pain body cannot survive in the light of consciousness. It needs unconsciousness, identification, the belief that this is who I am. But when you see it, when you recognize it as old emotional energy that's separate from your true self, it starts to dissolve. Let's shift gears and talk about relationships, because this is where spiritual teachings either prove themselves or fall apart. Tolle has a provocative claim. Most of what we call love isn't love at all. It's neediness masquerading as love. It's the ego seeking something from another person to make itself feel complete. Think about the classic romantic narrative. Two people meet. They complete each other. They can't live without each other. They're obsessed with each other. And we call this love. We write songs about it. We make movies about it. But Tolle says this is actually addiction. It's two egos using each other. Each person is trying to get something from the other: validation, worth, happiness, security. And this is why relationships cause so much suffering, because the other person inevitably fails to fulfill these unconscious demands. They don't behave the way your ego wants them to behave. They don't make you feel the way you need to feel, and so conflict arises. You've probably experienced this. The initial euphoria of a relationship where everything feels perfect. And then, slowly or suddenly, disappointment sets in. They're not who you thought they were. They don't meet your needs. They let you down. But here's the thing. They were never supposed to complete you. You were already complete. You just didn't know it. Real love, according to Tolle, can only arise from presence. It's not about need or dependency. It's about seeing another person clearly, without the filter of your ego's demands and expectations. It's about being so complete in yourself, so present, that you have something to give, rather than always taking. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing the other person to make you whole, that's when true intimacy becomes possible. Because now you're relating to them as they actually are, not as your ego needs them to be. This same principle applies everywhere. At work, with friends, with family. Most of the conflict in your life comes from unconscious expectations. Your mind has an image of how things should be, how people should behave. And when reality doesn't match that image, you suffer. But what if you could relate to people and situations without those layers of mental projection? What if you could just be present with what is? This is what Tolle calls accepting, enjoying, or enthusiastically embracing whatever you're doing. These are the three modalities of awakened doing. If you can't do one of these three things, then either stop doing it or accept it completely without internal resistance. Most people spend their lives in a state of unconscious resistance. They don't want to be where they are. They're waiting for the weekend, counting down to vacation, living for retirement. Or they're completely identified with what they do, defining themselves by their job or achievements, living in constant stress and competition. Both are forms of unconsciousness. Both create suffering. But imagine bringing full presence to whatever you're doing. Washing dishes, writing an email, having a conversation. Not thinking about what's next. Not wishing you were somewhere else. Just fully there, fully engaged with what is. This isn't some mystical state. It's actually the most natural thing in the world. Watch a child completely absorbed in play. Watch an artist lost in creation. Watch anyone in what athletes call the zone. They're not thinking about the past or future. They're here. And there's a quality of ease, of grace, of effortless action that comes from that presence. Tolle calls this doing without the doer. Action that arises from stillness rather than from the ego's need to achieve or prove something. Now, I want to address something that might be bothering you. You might be thinking, if I'm just present and accepting all the time, won't I become passive? Won't I stop striving, stop growing, stop trying to improve things? This is one of the biggest misunderstandings of Tolle's teaching. Presence doesn't make you passive. It makes you more effective. Here's why. When you're operating from the ego, from unconscious patterns, you're constantly fighting reality. You're resisting what is, arguing with life, creating internal friction. And all of that resistance takes energy. Most of your energy is being wasted on this internal struggle. But when you accept what is, when you stop fighting with reality, all of that energy becomes available. You can see more clearly. You can act more decisively. You're not clouded by emotional reactivity or mental resistance. Think about a crisis situation. The people who handle it best are the ones who don't panic, who don't resist what's happening, who simply see clearly and act. That's presence under pressure. Or think about any skill you've mastered. At first you had to think about every step, but as you got better, thinking decreased and presence increased. You just responded directly to what was needed in each moment. That's awakened action. Tolle also makes an important distinction between clock time and psychological time. Clock time is practical. You need to plan, to set goals, to remember the past and anticipate the future. But you do all of that in the present moment. You're here now, using time as a tool. Psychological time is different. It's when you're lost in time, when your mind is so absorbed in past or future that you're not present at all. It's worry about tomorrow, or regret about yesterday. It's the constant sense that something's missing, that you're not enough, that life will be better when... And here's the subtle trap. You can't use psychological time to escape psychological time. You can't make presence a goal for the future. I'll be more present starting Monday. Once I finish this project, then I'll really focus on being in the now. That's just the ego playing games, creating another future moment to pursue. Presence is only ever now. It's not an achievement. It's a recognition. It's seeing through the illusion that you're a separate self moving through time, and recognizing that you are the awareness in which all experience arises. This might sound abstract, so let me make it concrete. Try this right now. Notice your breath. Not controlling it, just feeling it. Notice the sensations in your body. Feel the weight of your body, the temperature of the air, the sounds around you. That's presence. That's the now. It's not exotic or special. It's just direct contact with this moment, without the filter of thinking. And if you do that for even a few seconds, you might notice something. A quality of aliveness, of spaciousness, of peace, that doesn't depend on your circumstances. That's what Tolle calls your essence, your true nature. It's always here. You just usually miss it, because you're lost in thought. Now, let's talk about what Tolle calls the unmanifested, or the source. This is where his teaching touches the deepest waters. He's pointing to a dimension of consciousness that's beyond form, beyond the world of things and objects. It's the stillness from which all life arises, the space in which everything appears. And according to Tolle, you are that. Your deepest identity isn't the person with a name and a history and a story. It's the awareness itself. This isn't just philosophy, it has practical implications. When you're rooted in this deeper dimension, when you're connected to the source, you have access to something the ego can't give you. True peace. Not happiness that depends on circumstances, but a deep okayness with life itself. People who are connected to this dimension have a quality about them. You can feel it. They're still, even when they're active. They're peaceful, even when facing challenges. It's not that they don't have problems or difficulties. It's that they're not fighting with life itself. And you can access this dimension right now, not by going somewhere or achieving something, but by becoming still, by letting thoughts subside, by resting in awareness itself. Tolle suggests a practice. Focus on the space between thoughts. Thought arises, then fades, and before the next thought, there's a gap. That gap is the unmanifested. That's the source. And the more you become familiar with that inner space, that stillness, the more it begins to inform your whole life. But here's the final trap, and it's a big one. The ego will try to co-opt even this teaching. It will turn presence into another achievement, enlightenment into another goal. I need to become more present. I need to transcend my ego. I need to be more spiritual. See what happened there? The ego just turned the very teaching that could free you into another form of seeking, another way to maintain psychological time, another way to say, I'm not good enough as I am. The truth is simpler and more radical. You don't need to become present. You already are the presence. You don't need to transcend the ego. You just need to see through it. You don't need to achieve enlightenment. You need to recognize that the one who's seeking enlightenment is itself the obstruction. This is what Tolle discovered on that park bench after his dark night of the soul. He didn't become someone new. He recognized what had always been there underneath the mental noise. And that recognition was liberation itself. So where does this leave you? What do you do with all of this? The answer is both simple and endlessly challenging. Become aware. Notice when you're lost in thought. Observe the voice in your head. Feel the aliveness in your body. Accept what is without resistance. And in those moments of presence, even if they're brief, you're touching something that doesn't change, that doesn't age, that doesn't need anything to be complete. That's the power of now. Not a technique or a method or a practice, but a recognition of what's always been true. You are not your thoughts. You are not your story. You are the awareness in which all of that appears. And that awareness, that presence, that consciousness, that's who you really are. So what do we take from this journey into the now? What does it actually mean for your life, for the choices you make today, for the way you show up in the world? Let me start by saying what this teaching isn't. It's not an excuse to be passive or irresponsible. It's not permission to stop planning or stop caring about your future. And it's definitely not about suppressing your thoughts or trying to be in some special state all the time. What Tolle is pointing to is something much more fundamental, a shift in identity. From thinking you are the voice in your head to recognizing you are the awareness that hears the voice. From believing you are your life story to realizing you are the consciousness in which the story appears. And that shift, subtle as it sounds, changes everything. Here's what you can actually do, right now, today. First, start catching yourself lost in thought. Not to judge it or stop it, but just to notice. You're walking somewhere, and suddenly you realize you've been mentally rehearsing a conversation that might happen later. You've been somewhere else entirely, missing this moment. Just notice that. Say to yourself, I was lost in thought, and come back to the present. Feel your feet touching the ground. Notice your breath. That's it. That simple act of recognition begins to create space between you and your thinking. Second, practice accepting small inconveniences completely. Traffic, waiting in line, a task you don't enjoy. Instead of your habitual resistance, the mental complaining, the wishing things were different. Try total acceptance. This is what's happening right now. See what happens to your stress level. See what happens to your energy. You might be surprised to discover that the situation itself often isn't the problem. Your resistance to it is. Third, bring presence to ordinary moments. washing dishes, walking, eating. These moments that your mind dismisses as unimportant, as just something to get through, are actually your life. They're where life is happening. And when you're fully there, when you're tasting your food, feeling the water on your hands, noticing the quality of light, these moments become surprisingly rich. Fourth, observe your pain body without judgment. The next time you feel strong negative emotion, resist the urge to act on it immediately, or to believe the stories your mind creates around it. Just feel it. Where does it live in your body? How does it want to take over your thinking? In that observing, you're bringing consciousness to unconsciousness. And consciousness is transformative. And finally, remember this. You're not trying to become someone different. You're not working towards some future state of enlightenment. Every moment you're present, even for a few seconds, you're already there. You're already home. Because presence isn't somewhere else. It's here, now, always. The beauty of this teaching is that it meets you wherever you are. You don't need special circumstances. You don't need to quit your job and move to a monastery. You just need to wake up to this moment. To stop sleepwalking through your life, lost in narratives about past and future, and start actually living. And here's what I've found to be true. Once you start to taste presence, once you experience even brief moments of being fully here, fully alive, not caught in the mind stream, you want more. Not in a desperate, grasping way, but naturally. Like someone who's been eating bland food their whole life and suddenly tastes something flavorful. There's a recognition. Oh, this is what I've been missing. Now, let me be honest with you about something. This summary, these words, this understanding, it can only take you so far. I can describe the taste of an orange all day long, but until you bite into one yourself, the description means nothing. The power of now isn't just information to consume. It's an invitation to experience something directly, to experiment with presence in your own life, to see for yourself whether what Tolle says is true. Because spiritual truth isn't something you believe, it's something you verify through your own experience. I've given you the map, the highlights, the core insights, but the territory, that's yours to explore. And honestly, that's where the real transformation happens. Not in understanding the concepts, but in living them, in catching yourself lost in thought and coming back, in accepting what is instead of fighting with reality, in recognizing, over and over, that you are not the voice in your head. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, if you feel even a spark of curiosity about this different way of being, I encourage you to read the book yourself. Because there's something about encountering these ideas directly, at your own pace, in your own time, that allows them to sink in at a deeper level. Tolle has a way of circling back to the same truths from different angles, and different passages will hit you at different times in your life. The book isn't just information. It's almost like medicine. You take what you need when you need it. A single paragraph might unlock something for you that hours of explanation couldn't touch. That's the nature of spiritual teaching. It's not linear. It's not logical. It speaks to something deeper than the thinking mind. And let's be real. This is challenging work. You've been identified with your mind your entire life. You've been living in psychological time for as long as you can remember. That's not going to change overnight. There will be moments when you're completely present, when everything feels clear and peaceful. And then you'll get lost in thought again. You'll get caught up in drama. You'll forget everything you've learned. That's okay. That's part of the process. Every time you notice you've been lost and come back to presence, you're strengthening that awareness muscle. You're waking up, bit by bit. The link to the book is right there in the description. Get yourself a copy. Not because I'm telling you to, but because you deserve to taste this for yourself. You deserve to discover what it's like to be fully alive, fully present, fully here. And hey, if this summary has been valuable to you, if it's opened up something new or reminded you of something you'd forgotten, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Because we're just getting started. There are so many incredible books out there, so many different teachers and traditions pointing to the same essential truth. And I want to take this journey with you, exploring them together, discovering what works, what resonates, what actually transforms our lives. This isn't just about collecting information, it's about genuine growth, about becoming more conscious, more present, more fully alive. And we do that together, learning from each other, supporting each other, reminding each other to wake up when we inevitably fall back asleep. So let's keep growing. Let's keep exploring. Let's keep coming back to now, over and over, until one day we realize we never really left. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.